Hey crafty friends, this is Jenny from crafttestdummies.com, and today I just have a little fun technique video for you. Today we're going to talk about 3 different ways to use gesso. Let's take a look. Gesso is a medium that artists have been using for a really long time. It's a way to prime a canvas so that the paint will actually stick to it. So back in the old days, canvases were just big pieces of cloth, but of course paint would just like follow right through it or absorb into it. So a coat of gesso, which is a mixture of paint and like a chalky substance like a gypsum, will give the surface something to really hold on to, so it's a primer. And I heard Dina Wakley say once that gesso is like underwear for your art. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different kinds of gesso, and then like I said, 3 ways that you can use it. So here what I have to show you are 2 different brands. Now, of course, there are a lot of brands of gesso. You're going to find, every company seems to have their own now. So this is some by Faber-Castell, and I just want to show you as it drizzles off of the paintbrush that it is a very thin, runny texture. That's fine. It doesn't have to be super thick. And you can just brush it on something like this manila tag, and it goes on very smooth. And while it will hold a texture, you see I can just kind of scribble it into it with the end of my paintbrush, it's just not super thick and chunky. Whereas this product by Deco Art is really, really gluey. It's almost, it's definitely thicker than honey. And this is the kind of product where if you love texture, if you want to see a lot of big chunky bits in your art, then this is going to be a good product for you. And again, I'll show you how this looks on a little manila tag. Just see, I can just kind of almost spatula it on. And this is when really having something like a palette knife is your friend, because it has a nice ability to spread it around like frosting, but then you can also use it to make texture. You can use a fork to create texture or the edge of your palette knife, but as you're probably guessing, that's one of the ways that you can use gesso is to actually add that impasto look or texture without using up globs and globs of paint. Because of course, impasto originally was the idea of layers and layers and layers of paint that created texture, but paint can be expensive. So it's a little bit easier to start off with the texture with the gesso and then add other things on top of it. So just one more time, I'm going to show you, this is the tag I just kind of put down, but let me show you another one here. This is another tag that I've created, and I just kind of spread the gesso on with a little bit of like the side of a credit card. But let me show you what happens when I add a little bit of this spray ink to it. This is a dilution spray, and you can see here that the paint has a tendency to kind of run and spread, and if I add a little bit of water, it will do so even more. And where there is no gesso, it's going to absorb in and make a different color, and it'll puddle and create like a different kind of effect on the actual gesso surface. So I just want to show you that. That's kind of cool, right? Something a little bit different. Much different than just if you had painted it all with white acrylic paint. Okay, now before I get too far, I also want to point out that gesso comes in black. I'm not sure how many companies do this, but thank God for Claudine Helmuth and Ranger. They put out this black gesso a few years ago. And I honestly have to wonder if you could just use black chalkboard paint, if it would have the same effect. But what I like about the black gesso is that, of course, it has great coverage, and it's just a different type of surface. So this is also a very thick product. It almost looks like a black paint. Notice how thick and chunky it is here. It holds right to the stirrer. And over here, I have one that I've done. I've spread it on, and here where it's dry. And this time I'm going to add a little bit of a mica spray on top so you can see what that texture looks like. At least I think I am. There we go. So here you can see the gesso created a texture, and now the mica particles are kind of puddling in between. And of course, on something like this, where it's dark in some places and light in the other, the mica is just going to have a whole different kind of effect. So I'll show you what those look like when they're dry. Okay, so now that we've had our little primer on gesso, let's just get right to those 3 ways, because I've actually already told you. One of the ways you can use gesso is to create texture on any of your surfaces, whether it's canvas or paper or cardstock. You can get some really fun, cool effects like this, or even like this. And I think that that's a lot of fun. It's just something completely different. Now, the other way that you can use gesso is as a straight up primer, but think a little bit beyond just priming a canvas surface. If you have junk mail or things that you want to recycle, you can cover it with gesso because it is a primer. It is thick, it is opaque, and it's a perfect surface then to add more colors or layers on top. Now, the last little way I like to use gesso is with what I like to call an overly aggressive paper. Sometimes you have a paper like this that's really pretty, but it's really, really bright. And what I really want to do is just like tone it down, calm down a little bit so that I can maybe use it for something else. Well, then I'll go ahead and I'll take that gesso, and this is where I actually like the thinner gesso, and I just add a little bit on top. And then all of a sudden I have now kind of a place where it's a little smoky or a little cloudy, and it's a place for the eye to focus and rest. So it's great if you have a lot of busy background and you want to kind of, instead of creating like a mat or putting down a doily or adding a layer, it's a way of adding a layer without adding a layer, if that makes sense. So there we go. Now, just one more thing on that texture business. If you have cards or texture tools, this is a great time to get those out and get them handy. So this is the Sukaniko Squeegee. You can see it is well loved in my world. I will go ahead and throw some gesso down on a tag, like so. And then I'll just use my squeegee to add a really bold texture. I think that's a lot of fun. I enjoy that kind of like really bold impasto look. Oh, and also, I have to show you one more. I thought that was going to be all with the texture I was going to show you, but I have to show you more. If you are using a thick enough gesso, and remember I said some of them are thinner and some of them are thicker, so you might need to kind of look around and find the product that you like best. But I love a thick gesso because, as you can see right here, I'm applying some to the edge of my squeegee, and now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to smear it in my stencil to create texture. And it's a little less than perfect, which I like. Think like al fresco or, you know, plaster of Paris-y looks to it. But you get a really gorgeous print, if you will. And now I can go ahead, let that dry, and then layer over top of it with other watercolors or spray mists. So I hope this inspired you to maybe try gesso for the first time. If you haven't ever tried it, I recommend it. And again, the brands that I'm using and I like are the DecoArt acrylic gesso because it is so super thick, the Faber-Castell pot because it's thinner and easier to use, and the magical black gesso because it's just so different. By the way, this makes a great background if you're using a paint pen because then the colors just glow. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. And if you haven't heard of One Little Tag Challenge, One Little Tag Craft Challenge, we have a Facebook group, now over 300 members. We're all playing along every day, making tags, making art, and encouraging each other. So make sure you check the card section over here for some of our other One Little Tag craft challenges. And of course, lots of craft product reviews, techniques, and news that you can use. Thank you so much for watching and have a crafty day.